The late summer 2018 convention season was, shall we say, a strange time for me. It was a balancing act of trying to find as much joy as possible in a series of events that I always look forward to for the friends I usually only get to see once or twice a year, while at the same time processing one of the most difficult situations I've experienced in my personal life since, well, I can't even remember. But more about that later. August opened up with Armadillocon 40 in Austin. Yes, I was back at this venerable event in my old hometown, which has always been a weekend of relaxation and renewing old acquaintances, usually around the hotel bar. I actually stayed in the convention hotel this year, and after admiring the ambiance of my room, I spent the evening before the festivities doing just such calm socializing. One old and dear friend I can always count on seeing at Armadillocon is Stina Light, currently working on her 5th novel for Saga Press next year. She also introduced me to special guest Holly Black, whom I'd never met before. Very nice. Once again, I was shoved quite willingly onto 5 panels, only one of which, a late-night panel on time travel stories, which is not exactly an SF subgenre I have wide experience in reading, felt like one where I didn't belong. But everything else I enjoyed immensely. The guest of honor this year was a writer new to me, Deji Bryce Olukotan, whose novels Nigerians in Space and After the Flare I picked up prior to the con and plan to review soon. I liked him on the only panel I saw him on, but didn't get a chance to be introduced personally. On the whole, it was terrific to be back in Austin, to eat at my favorite Lebanese restaurant, and to be on hand for Armadillocon's 40th event. Long may it continue. But all the while this was going on, let's just say my brain was in and out of a fog that I haven't yet, in all honesty, fully recovered from. Without going into sordid details, I'll just say that right around the middle of July, my emotional hull, so to speak, took a direct torpedo hit right below the waterline. A foolish mistake, entirely my fault, impacted the single most cherished friendship I've had in all of BookTube. I hope not permanently, but still, it's left me with an enormous hollow cavern of regret and anxiety in the middle of my chest, and it is absolutely not a fun feeling. So I did my usual coping routines. Retail therapy helped. I've needed to upgrade the old wardrobe anyway, and nothing makes me happier than finding a decent-looking suit that fits without needing extra tailoring. The 20 pounds I've dropped since June the 1st is also a positive. And flinging myself into my work. Even in airport hotels the night before a dawn flight. I'm burning the midnight oil, editing and writing and doing whatever I can not to think about shit. Still, for about 3 weeks, my head was useless even for the simple pleasure of reading fiction. And this, my good friends, is the whirlpool I was in when I left for Worldcon in San Jose. The weather in San Jose turned out to be awesome, which put me in a good mood. Most of the BookTube SFF crew had already been in town a couple of days, but I was delighted to be met at the airport by the ever-cheerful Kelsey, aka the Fancy Hat Lady.
Figure it out. Hello. Am I supposed to say something?
No, not at all. Just but we'll go ahead and keep that.
This is why I don't vlog. I'm really terrible at it.
Okay, well, what do you think in the comments? Let us know. While everyone else was staying at the Marriott right by the convention center, I checked into the Fairmont about 2 blocks away, which turned out to be where the Sifwa suite was, so that was all right. The lobby initially confused me because the layout pushes the bar front and center while shunting the registration desk off to one side. I guess they want you good and sloshed before you get your bill. Still, my room on the 11th floor was beautiful and spacious, With a terrific view of the very pretty downtown out front and a fully stocked fridge I had absolutely no intention of touching, though I liked little details like the separate tub and shower stall. Once I got settled in, I did a brief walking tour of the area immediately around the hotel, and was happy to find that the part of town I was in, at any rate, was quite lovely, and there was a lot of nice shopping and dining to be had without needing to step too far out of the hotel itself. A post office was only about 200 yards away, so that was definitely going to help my shipping books home needs, and as it turned out, Bree and Rachel had also done a thorough recon of the area and found the nearest grocery store. Map apps are an amazing thing, I tell you. Finally, I wandered over to the convention center to pick up my badge, where I was met right away by some wonderful friends and I'm sure familiar faces to most of you. I'd met Bree last year in Helsinki. BookTube is one of those funny communities where Americans sometimes travel to other continents before they meet each other. But it was a joy to finally meet Rachel from Kalanadi, Paul from Common Touch of Fantasy, who's just made his BookTube comeback, and even Final Blow Joe, who had flown over from the UK for his very first Worldcon ever. I'd also eventually meet back up with Claire Rousseau and Denise Harwood, both of whom I'd done last year's Worldcon with as well. Our first order of business was exploring the dealer's room, and we were soon exposed to how vast and cavernous a space the convention center is, and how that space forced Worldcon to spread itself out in strange ways. First up, though, we all descended upon some booksellers' booths where money was spent, to put it mildly, and in an adorable moment I sadly didn't capture on video, Rachel met Japanese author Taiyo Fuji, who was as thrilled to meet her as she was to meet him. Being around my BookTube friends, needless to say, did much to relieve my shaky mood, and what I enjoyed the most about everyone's company was exploring the food options around downtown. We met up with two more booktubers, John and Bex from Night Hunter Books, and among the places we stuffed ourselves silly was the burger joint Johnny Rockets, the devilishly tempting bakery Bajan, and also Tandoori Kitchen, where I discovered that shared interests among booktubers can be far-ranging indeed and include such esoteric hobbies as gerbil breeding?
So yeah, my dad downloaded a genetic software thing so we could plug in some stuff to get the cool patterns.
Oh, my dad
breed gerbils. I did. Oh my god.
I just had gerbils that my friends bred, and I was jealous of my friends.
And I found a gerbil breeding and selling website online, and I ordered a special gerbil with the genetics that I
Oh my god,
that I wanted.
that is so
that
cool.
was, you led the childhood that I was sitting dreaming of having.
So I got my parents.
One evening, we also sampled some food trucks that had pulled up into a square directly in front of the Fairmont, where most of us tried the Thai food, which I found above average, to my pleasant surprise. Mostly, though, the company of your fellow travelers in this great reading life always proves to be the best medicine. Back to the convention itself. Remember when I mentioned cavernous spaces? Well, what was interesting was the layout of the meeting rooms where panels and readings were held, which had such high ceilings they were taller than they were wide, which was bizarre, and which were all clustered together so tightly that overflow in standing room only was common. And while the problems with programming that had plagued the convention in the months prior were quickly and impressively resolved, with the capable help of Mary Robinette Kowal, crowd logistics were still a mess. I don't think I actually sat in a chair while watching half the panels I went to. But I did enjoy some of the panels, particularly one on Chinese SF in translation, and an enjoyably fiery one on Afrofuturism. Still, for me, the panels weren't as satisfying in their variety as those in Helsinki, though I confess that could be the fault of what I simply chose to see. Sunday was the big day for the Hugo Awards ceremony, but it began on a sad note for us, as Bree had to fly home that morning to start a new job on Monday. Still, she remained with us in spirit. Sunday was the day I also finally connected once again with Stina Light, who had an awful mess with her flight arrangements that were luckily resolved by her legend of an agent. Stina joined us for the Hugos, where we started with a dinner at a Malaysian place we'd been itching to try all week, and which I have to say disappointed me a little because they didn't make my dinner spicy. It was tasty, though. Afterwards, we luckily made it to the convention center just before the line began to get insanely long. Still, it didn't feel as if we ended up waiting too long before we finally filed in.
You gonna put him on the ear? Got you back in his ear?
I'm not going to recap the entire awards ceremony for you. You can watch it on YouTube yourself and bask in the glory of N.K. Jemison's badass acceptance speech for her historic three-peat win.
Thank you, and welcome to the 2018 Hugo Awards ceremony. Please put your hands together and welcome your Master of Ceremonies, Worldcon 76 Artist Guest of Honor and Hugo Award winner, John Picasso.
Master of Ceremonies John Picasso, an old buddy of mine from Texas and Armadillocon, kept everything so efficiently paced that the entire ceremony was over in just under 2 hours. Some people felt it went a little too fast, but I never got the feeling that any individual winner was denied their moment. I've seen a few Hugo ceremonies now, and this is one of the best and most memorable, with a fine slate of finalists and winners that I was, for the most part, very happy with. Following the event, I was pretty tired, so I went up to the SFF suite with Stina, but only stayed about an hour or so before it was time to call it a night.